Good evening, Infrastructure family. Welcome to week 8 of our series, which we are hosting alongside SANLAM and UKZN. This is your resident Oprah 2.0, Sharon Shanmugam, and I'm the chair of the SAICE Durban committee. I am really happy to have all of you here this evening. I do apologize to everybody who logged in last week. In our defense, though, I did mention that we were taking a break for Diwali on week 7, and also it appears on our itinerary. Be that as it may, I do apologize for the inconvenience, and hopefully some of you found it as a welcome reprieve. As always, I will head into our house rules before we proceed any further. Note that the event is being recorded. The participant audio and video are disabled. Should you wish to speak, please send a message to me directly towards the end of the presentation, or more preferably, please post questions using the Q&A chat function, and we will address these during the panel discussion. Please feel free to use the chat function to connect with your peers in industry and with us, of course. Regarding CPD certificates, we will issue 1 certificate per attendee who is either an associate or corporate member of SAICE at the end of the series. We will email you once the series is over in order for you to communicate with us further regarding your certificates. My co-host for the evening is Dr. Justin Pringle. He's a familiar face by now. He is rated by South Africa's National Research Foundation as a top emerging scientist in the country, and his research in ocean modeling has formed the basis of many other national and international research efforts. Justin founded and heads the Environmental Fluid Mechanics Research Group at KZN. His research group has an international profile, and this is the only one of the like in the country. He also mentors the Engineers Without Borders student chapter at UKZN. Welcome, Justin. As you know, UKZN and SAICE collaborated to create the series with the premise of wanting to deliver as much value to students as to industry peers during these difficult times. SANLAM, our corporate sponsor, kindly and graciously have provided the means to bring this event to life. And thus it has been a rewarding experience to date. With this, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Mr. Tutukani Ngubani. He is our speaker from SANLAM this afternoon. He began his career at UKZN as well as a research assistant. He then moved on to the Department of Correctional Services in Pretoria, where he practiced as a senior policy developer. Currently, he is a financial advisor and investment specialist at SANLAM Professional Services. Welcome, Tutukani.
Thank you so very much, Sharon, and grace and peace to all of you. I truly appreciate this opportunity to share briefly with you. I'm sure my colleagues have shared quite a number of insights on financial planning. Mine today will be on retirement planning as a journey that is a long journey that we ought to get an understanding on. Let me once again appreciate and congratulate all of you all for the grace of being given this information, most of you at an early stage of your careers, which will assist you in making sound decisions with your finances as soon as you get into the space of employment. We are saying that for retirement planning is a long journey, and since it's a long journey, it requires that we have a number of systems put in place. If we had to draw an analogy of driving a long distance, you would need a vehicle, you need to have direction, you need to have vision, you need to fill up along the way so that you can arrive at your destination. And the reason why you need all those things, for example, the most crucial aspects of a long journey is your vehicle. If your vehicle is not in order, you may find it difficult to get to where you want to go. And again, it's your direction. The direction is much more important because it will determine how fast you arrive at your destination without losing much along the way. And vision, also you need to check your vehicle's lights, your indicators, to make sure that everything is on point so that you arrive at your destination. And along the way, if it's longer, you definitely need to fill up and arrive at your destination safely. It's the same principle, it's the same model that we apply when planning for retirement. When you plan for retirement, we always advise that the most efficient vehicle to use is the retirement annuity. We do understand that there are many investment instruments, investment vehicles that we can make use of, but there are many benefits that we get in using the retirement annuity, which is what I'm going to explain briefly. And that is part of your financial planning process. We also have a goal manager that helps you track whether or not you are in line with the goals that you seek to achieve, and you top up if there be a need, and you arrive at your retirement comfortably. We say choosing the vehicle like the RA, there are many benefits. The reason why we choose the RA, I'm going to elaborate on that in the next slide, but the reason why we choose the most appropriate vehicle to invest in is what makes your journey more effective, more enjoyable as you travel. Number two, directions. You do not stray from your chosen path, which means once you have chosen that this is the vehicle that you're going to use, you keep to it. You make use of an opportunity like the goal manager to navigate your retirement path for you. And you fill up, make use of the opportunity to increase your payments where possible. And you top them up on an annual basis. And then you arrive as expected at your destination. Why is the RA the retirement annuity, the most recommended vehicle, most recommended instrument to use when planning for retirement? Number one, there are multiple tax benefits that you get from using a retirement annuity. The government pays you a considerable amount to incentivize you to save for retirement, because you are saying to the government, you are not going to be the responsibility of the state when it comes to retirement. You will have your own funds to take care of yourself at old age. In other words, you are saying, I'm going to employ money early so that I make money work for me when I can no longer work for myself. And another tax deduction is that you deduct up to 27.5% of your gross income from taxable earnings. Amounts which exceed the limit can be carried forward to later years or used to increase the tax-free portion of any lump sums at the retirement. So no tax on the earnings in the fund, interest, dividends, or capital gains, that is not taxed. So that's the first benefit. The first benefit is multiple tax incentives. And then is the protection from yourself. Not all of us are disciplined to save the money and keep it for the purpose for which we are saving it for. So if you are not disciplined, that's not a problem. You can only access your retirement funds in your retirement annuity after age 55. You cannot access them before that. The retirement age for retirement annuities was until recently limited to age 69. A change in legislation now makes it possible for people over age 69 to join or carry on investing in a retirement annuity fund. And the third benefit, why this vehicle is important, is protection from creditors. If you are in the process of insolvency, your retirement annuity investment is protected from creditors. They won't be able to take from your savings. This ensures that your savings will be available when it is most needed and it is going to be used for what it was invested for. And investment choice is another fourth benefit that we use RA for. An RA potentially offers you the opportunity to invest in a wide range of funds, risk profile solutions, and share portfolios customized to suit your needs and your risk profile. And these benefits start as little as 200 or 300 rands. So the benefit of compound interest, I'm going to quickly give you a video, which I will discuss very shortly, briefly after. And then after playing this video, we will engage in a bit of a talk around the importance of compound interest and of starting to your retirement planning early.
The wealth bonus has made the Cumulus Echo Retirement Plan a bestseller. Let's take a quick look at how it works. Like any retirement annuity, you make monthly contributions that grow over time, thanks to investment returns earned after charges. This forms your savings value at retirement. With the Cumulus Echo Retirement Plan, you also get an additional amount when you retire. This is called the wealth bonus. The wealth bonus is a percentage of your total savings value at retirement. The percentage you get depends on how long you've saved for. For example, 10% after 10 years, 50% after 25 years, and 110% after 40 years. So let's say you've been consistently making a fixed monthly contribution into your Cumulus Echo Retirement Plan. By the time you retire, the value of your savings will be, say, 1 million rand. If you've saved for 10 years, your wealth bonus will be 10%, giving you an extra 100,000 rand. Saving for 25 years puts your wealth bonus at 50%, amounting to 500,000 rand. And what if you've saved for longer, say 37.5 years? This gives you a wealth bonus of 100%, essentially doubling the value of your savings. Your wealth bonus also depends on how many of your contracted contributions you make before your planned retirement age. So what happens if you stop your contributions after a while? Say 20 years. In this example, even if you've saved, you get a smaller bonus because you didn't make all your contracted contributions. And what if, after 20 years, you decide to transfer your retirement savings to a different provider? Because you've only saved for 20 years, your wealth bonus percentage will be 30%. And because you didn't make all your contributions, the wealth bonus will reduce proportionally. We all know staying committed to retirement savings is tough. But if you keep making your contributions and stick with SANLAM for the duration, you'll reap the rewards. The wealth bonus has made the cumulative.
So not only do you benefit from getting interest over interest, which is what we call the benefits, the miracle of compound interest, you also get a wealth bonus if you invest early and for a longer period of time. So that was my short on retirement planning, and a happier life awaits you. And we are having a competition, as you may have well known, and we'd like to congratulate our winner, which is Aishwarya Dayanand, for winning our competition. And the link will be shared on the inbox by my colleague so that you can also be part of the competition. Congratulations to you. And here are our details should you need any further information. I thank you.
Thank you, Tutukani. That was a really great presentation on retirement. A happier life indeed, I hope, awaits all of us once we retire successfully. And yeah, I agree with you. Everyone should be entering the competition. Congratulations to Aishwarya as well. Thank you again to Tutukani. I'm going to now hand over to Dr. Pringle, who will be introducing our keynote speakers for the evening. Yes.
Thanks, Sharon. Thanks, everyone. Just a big thank you to SANLAM, to both SANLAM and SAICE from UKZN side. Thanks for partnering with us along this very long journey. It's coming to an end, which is, it's been quite exciting and a lot of fun. And then specifically, just a big thank you to our industry partners who have shared their experience so far, and obviously to Jeshika and Peter tonight, who will be sharing a very interesting talk which we look forward to. So just to introduce both Jeshika and Peter to you, Jeshika is a project manager and civil engineer with over 13 years of experience in project managing, design, implementation, and contract management in multidisciplinary projects in the water, stormwater, sanitation sector. And she also serves on the UKZN Industry Advisory Board, which we're incredibly grateful for, and helps us steer our curriculum to make it more beneficial for members of the industry. Whereas Peter he's been working for 26 years in planning, design, and project management in various civil engineering projects. And he's got extensive industry, extensive involvement in multidisciplinary project management as the lead engineer. So we look forward to their talk tonight, and yeah, take it away, guys.
Thank you very much, Justin. I'm gonna ask Sharon to please share our presentation. So while we just are waiting, I'll kick off. If we can just get to the, great. Thank you so much, Sharon. A very, very good afternoon to you all. It's really, really great to be here alongside Peter Tooley to share some insights from a project that's really opened up a whole new world of innovation to the Bosch Projects team. So Peter and I are representing the Bosch Projects Developments Division today. And it's really very exciting for us to help take you through the journey that we've embarked on over the last few years. And as we go through this presentation this afternoon, you'll also gain an appreciation for how beautifully simple sustainable infrastructure is to plan, to design, and to deliver. And what we hope that you'll get out of this is that it will help you think differently about your areas of specialization as a practicing professional, but also to guide these selections for students, the selection of your areas of specialization for the students who are in attendance. So I'll kick off the presentation this afternoon with some overarching sustainability principles and our project philosophy on the case study that we're going to be sharing today, and then hand over to Peter, who will talk about how we put these ideas into practice. So let's get started. Sharon, next slide. So we've gotten so comfortable with doing things the way that we've always done them, that sometimes the thought of doing something different can sometimes be quite absurd and sometimes seemingly unnecessary. But different is good and different is exciting. So, so this is really the fundamental of this project. Next slide, please. We're really right in the thick of COP26 that ends this Friday. And you might be thinking about, what does this mean for South Africa? Well, our government has made several commitments through South Africa's nationally determined contributions. And you may have been following the conversations in the media around the investment that's been raised for South Africa's own just transition to a low carbon economy. And although we often talk about this as an electricity or an energy focused discussion, there's much that impacts civil engineering and the infrastructure that we develop. So let's quickly set the scene around this. 2019 was the second warmest year on record, and at the end of the warmest decade ever recorded. And we know that carbon dioxide levels and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere rose to new record highs in 2019. And we're seeing weather patterns changing, sea levels rising, we're seeing weather events that are becoming more and more extreme. And these add additional complexities to the way that we plan and design infrastructure, and more importantly, how we operate and maintain them. Next slide, please. Taking you back to some of your environmental management theory from final year, we're on a trajectory to net zero. You probably hear a lot about net zero if that's not necessarily a space that you're already in. But there's the net zero targets for 2050. But what when we design infrastructure, we're focusing on a post net zero and a post 2050 world. And that's really a focus on regeneration. Next slide, please, Sharon. And the next one. So what we see is that the increasing demand for infrastructure results in increased greenhouse gas productions, and also the depletion of non-renewable resources. And these things affect land use and energy use. So when we think about where South Africa features on the global footprint of contribution to carbon emissions, we sometimes underestimate our impacts. And for a very small economy, our impacts are actually quite large. If you really look at our contributions, and these are 2020 statistics. Next slide, please, Sharon. And where we sit right now is that we're at the combination of the green and circular economy principles. And this is really where we hit the sweet spot that I believe can bring in this new dimension in infrastructure development. And that's ultimately, that's the basis of the project that we're going to be sharing today. It's ultimately where we were tasked with essential service provisions, and we brought in the element of human infrastructure, green infrastructure, and blue infrastructure, where traditionally, in response to a client's request, we would just provide gray infrastructure. And what we've done through this project is to epitomize the circular economy. And when we talk about the circular economy, oftentimes when we think of circular and smart, we think high tech, but we'll show you as we go through this project how circular and smart doesn't necessarily have to be very techy. Next slide, please. Thank you. So onto the project case study. This project is called the Fumba town development, and it was the first major real estate development in Zanzibar. I don't think that Zanzibar needs much of an introduction, but the beautiful Zanzibar is an island off the coast of Tanzania. And the project is located just south of the international airport of Zanzibar on the Fumba Peninsula. And it comprises an area of 150 acres with about 1.5 kilometers of seafront. The basis of the development and the project objective was to create an integrated town that facilitates international investment, that provides affordable living. And in addition, the development was also looking to regenerate subterranean water lenses. We'll talk about that a little bit more within the island substructure. And this was really very critical for the local economy between Tanzania and Zanzibar. As Bosch Projects, we provided master planning, design and implementation of all of the civil and electrical bulk infrastructure. There was also a new district transformer. We were responsible for the water abstraction. We'll talk a little bit more about the water systems. There was a 2 megaliter wastewater treatment plant for the first phase of the development that kicked off. We were also responsible for the roads and stormwater infrastructure and for the regeneration of the subterranean water lenses within the island substructure. Next slide, please. Some of the very interesting information on the project itself. So this town was the first fully sustainable new urban development project that was based on permaculture principles. It provided affordable living whilst integrating business, recreational, health, and educational facilities within the development. And if you're wondering about the demand for development like this, Fumba town is actually currently the fastest selling real estate development in Tanzania. The project itself has been developed in 3 phases with over 2,000 residential units and over 250,000 square meters of mixed use and commercial space. And we'll take you into some of the nuances of this type of mixed use development. Next slide, please. So from an engineering perspective, which will lead into what Peter will talk about shortly, we've designed and implemented some phenomenal systems. And these include rainwater harvesting systems, potable water from boreholes and reuse for future phases. From a renewable energy perspective, the development of a solar park for the second phase of the development. There's the benefit of the on-site sewer treatment. There's sludge to agriculture and a biogas solution for the future phases. There's also the effluent reuse in gardens and communal areas, and we'll talk about how beneficial that was from a practical perspective. There's communal growing areas, so community gardens for food production. There's also furniture and housing panel factories for local production, a service center for jobs and waste management. And this ties into the reclamation of plastic waste for the plastic furniture elements. There's chicken coops and composting and how those talk to each other. There's also a nursery with beehives, and we understand the fundamentals of pollination and how this enhances the elements of food security. There's also fish farms. This helps with irrigation and after polishing from the reed beds at the wastewater treatment wells. Before I hand over to Peter, just some principles before we kick into the infrastructure systems considerations. We talked about permaculture, and permaculture is basically utilizing what's naturally available in an area to enhance living. And it's not just to mimic the environment, but it's also to enhance the benefits that you get from enhancing the natural environment. So minimizing the heat island effect, for instance. The second is the principles of the use of local materials. So all of the materials for construction were from local sources, except where we couldn't get the quality required. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we did this on the roads. From the perspective of using local, there's some really exciting things done with coral on the groundwater recharge. And then from the stormwater perspective, there were no pipes in this development, and we'll show you how and why. And then bioswales. So the interesting thing on this development is that the homeowners could actually choose the trees that they planted in front of their homes. And that meant that it enhanced the development through naturally occurring food trees versus just a pretty tree, and through bioremediation and developing rich soils. And Peter will tell you some interesting stories about using bamboo slips to regenerate poor soils. So now that you've got a feel for the bigger picture, Peter will take you into some of the details on the project. Next slide, please.
I'm not sure if I've come on because our timing was impeccable. As you hand it over,
I can hear you, Peter. You can go ahead.
You can hear me clearly. Okay. So, yeah, thank you, Jesh. Sharon, do you want to wait a few minutes for those people that might have gone through load shedding as well and waiting to switch over, or should I proceed?
I think you can give it a minute, Peter. That
Sure.
should be fine. Yeah.
Not a problem.
So everyone, we're just taking a minute for people who are going into load shedding from 6 p.m. We'll proceed in a few seconds. I think you can proceed, Peter.
Great. Okay, let's do this. Well, effectively what I'm doing now is dumbing down the conversation as Jess started with all her various degrees and qualifications. I'm just a normal civil engineer that has learned some new things and hopefully share it. Through the presentation, I'm hopefully telling a story of my experience as I've walked through a really fun project. There's a couple of comments or items that Jesh failed to mention. And the first one is we're working on an island. We're working in Zanzibar. And when we first met our client, it was in Durban, and he desperately tried to explain how Zanzibar works. And Zanzibar is slow. So a lot of the processes, a lot of the items that Jesh has mentioned that hopefully we would have wanted to see active already, for example, the fish farms and the recycling, those are all going to come, but the development at the moment is flying. Again, we went through a very difficult period, as often is found with most projects, and that's why the starting point is actually not really a sustainable element. It's actually any project that you're working on. And so my aim of today is, as I run through some of the stories, hopefully that both colleagues and students realize that the principles that we're working in the business as usual environment are even more important and as important when you start to work in the sustainability environment. And that I hope to show that any varsity student that's gone through any lectures, the key and the focus of any lecturer, mentor, is to teach us to think, not just to duplicate what was done yesterday, but to actually think. And so the starting point of today is know your client. Too often the client is the person who pays the money. That's not the case. As a civil engineer, that's one of your clients. Our clients are the people, yes, who initiate, who do pay the money because they have a dream and a need and a desire, and they're coming normally with the passion and the idea and the finances. But please understand, our clients are the end users. Our clients are the neighbors to the work that we do. Our clients are the people that stand next to you in shopping centers. And if you're not designing responsibly as a civil engineer, you're missing your calling and you're missing your training. And so what I love about where our industry is going is, and what I love about what certain clients are doing is they're recognizing the importance of doing a development in a sustainable way is an absolute imperative to moving forward. But more than that, what we're starting to learn, as Jesh alluded to, is it's not difficult. It's not rocket science. It's not even chem eng. It's actually in our field, it's civil engineering at its best. But know your client first, know your end user, and remember that as you go through. So as we go into the next slide and start to play around with some pictures on permaculture and my story. And of course, when I first went to Zanzibar, I had no idea what permaculture was. But in the bottom left-hand corner was a couple that taught me so much. In the bottom left-hand corner, that couple is standing in what the area of the photo directly above used to look like. You'll see very clearly it's coral. The history of the project, a previous developer had come in and stripped the area of its large trees and never did any developments thereafter. Our client, CPS, had a dream and had a vision, grew up originally, was a German that grew up, and you would have seen the original slide that Jess showed. Everything was square and in lines and in columns, typical German, and a German architect and a German engineer. And our client just got frustrated. He had grown up as a missionary's child in Tanzania, was qualified as a civil engineer and came back to give back what he had learned. He met this young couple that you can see in the bottom left-hand corner, Franco and his wife, and they went through a process of teaching and showing what is possible when you take an environment and you utilize the stuff that's in the environment and you try and mimic what the environment is already doing. And so as I walked away from this time that I spent with this couple, and it wasn't just one, because the passion just flowed out of him. It was many occasions we sat and he dreamed and dreamed and dreamed with both our clients and other engineers that were working from our office on the project. And there was no soil, there was no topsoil, there was no opportunity to bring topsoil in because the island as a whole is very scarce, soil is scarce. And he effectively, what he started doing is cutting down vegetation in preparation for construction, storing it, mulching it, putting it into the ground, taking the manure from chickens, blending it in, going to areas in the island, which were very fertile, with a little piece of bamboo and some rice, shove it in the ground in those fertile areas for a week or two, bring it back in the bamboo, because bamboo is available on the island, bring it back, and allow the nutrients, allow the bugs and the worms and all the little microorganisms that everyone talks about and has lots of detail about. I watched those little guys transform the leaves, the plants that we would normally do a strip of the land, take all that vegetation because you don't want it in your layer works, you don't want it in your trenches, and take it off site, stockpile the topsoil one side, and for reuse. But as I've said, there was no topsoil in this development, and we would throw all that stuff on a dump somewhere. And permaculture, the whole principle is, guys, we've got natural resources, let's learn to use them. So the challenge to me as an engineer was to put aside some of the memories and the things that I'd learned over the years, and to re-look at what we had in Zanzibar, to spend some time on the island, going through the natural forest, looking at what was there, spending time with the people, understanding their food, understanding what how they prepare it, or how they've lived for many years, and start to grow a passion for the site that we were developing. And in that, realized as well, and please remember this, we talk about multidisciplinary, even in my CV, and being multidisciplinary engineers, working on projects with all these different types, and have multi-talks to individuals that design different factors or different disciplines, and then they bring it all together, and there you have a development. Interdisciplinary design is something slightly different, because it calls for the electrical engineer to talk to the civil engineer. It calls for the water engineer to speak to the client, to the people. It talks to that interaction, constant interaction of the various disciplines, to make sure that as you start to understand each other and work with each other, and that's what I learned from Franco and his team, is to learn to actually communicate, to say, hey, when I'm building this road, some of the things that I left over are this, and I need this, and start to have that conversation with each other. And you start to realize that one leads into the other. The waste from one is the feed for another, and just some amazing, amazing stuff. In the top right-hand corner is the vegetable gardens that are absolutely blooming. Remember, on the top left, that's what it used to look like. And yes, it's taken time. It took about a year to develop the grounds and the gardens that you're seeing in the bottom left and in the circle in the middle. It took a long time. Education is key. Franco used to run, when he still does, permaculture schools on the island where students can come and go through and spend time learning, from building pizza ovens with mud to developing sewer treatments. Their whole residence, or the sewer ran down the middle where they used to eat, but it got processed through process, finished off with beautiful fish, which was then used and eaten. And the beauty of it, it was so simple that the local environments, the local people, the local environments accepted it, and the people started to buy into this process. And across Fumba is the people are elevated, they're recognized, they're celebrated, from security training to food production. And what's happening in that middle island, that little circle that I've shown there, is Franco's little world, where Jesh talked about the bees, the recycling, the rubbish, everything else that goes through. It all happens in that area of the development. And it is amazing what he's been able to do. From a sewer treatment, sludge gets taken, gets regenerated into the soils that he's been building through the various processes that I spoke about earlier. And out of that is coming some amazing, amazing vegetation that was previously would have not been possible. And it costs very, very little, which is amazing. And as we go into the next slide, you'll start to see some of the key elements of mine has inflicted, there we go, some of the key elements of And I spent time on that permaculture and try to unpack some of the things that were happening. And I certainly won't do it justice. But what it helped me do is to understand the end goal on this development. And so I spent time there. Please feel free to take time to go and look at Fumba Town online. And there's different YouTubes that Franco has prepared talking about what was done. But then taking those principles of, well, how do we best use the resources we have? How do we best use what's available and start to design something that speaks to the end dream? And that is to create a development that incorporates all elements of people, of vegetation, of animals and bugs and birds, to regenerate and reignite a piece of land that had been destroyed by others as they raped the trees. And so the starting point was, let's talk on the water element. Zanzibar is under a lot of threat for water. Those who don't know, who I've once again had to learn, is most islands have what they call sweetwater lenses. It sits underneath the topsoil, the ground. And in this case, in Zanzibar, it actually sits inside the coral. There are areas where, as you can see in the middle picture, where we've walked down into a water source that actually feeds most of Zanzibar town and Stone Town. It's pumped straight out of there into a reservoir and distributed directly through to the communities. Now, understand that if that's not protected, if that's not looked after, those people that live there, their livelihoods would stop. You would have to go through massive processes in trying to protect that resource or recycle, which is once again expensive, whereas already we have on the island a natural filtration process. Why would you want to ruin it? And so remember, design with the end in mind. The pictures on the right is a client's, once again, a dream of saying, well, if we're going to use local resources, what do we have? We have bamboo, we have timber, we have other grasses, we have sisal. They have a whole variety of things. There's sugarcane on the island, which is full of fiber. Maybe not indigenous, but it's there. And there's byproduct that comes out of it that can be used. And so in that factory that he developed, he started looking at different ways of creating building material. And over the last 5 years, all of this is transformed to using coral as building material. As you can imagine, with the salty, you don't want to mix it with cement. So what else can we do? And different technologies that have been put in place to be able to utilize the local materials, but remembering from a road design to sewer, to water, electricity, vegetation, social areas, water reuse, factories. All of this comes down to what is the end goal? And the end goal has to be to create a place, an environment that was better than it was before, than we first got there. And what's beautiful, and we're seeing it with people living in the town in the first phase, that's all the first half of the first phase that's been built, and living in it and loving it and living the dream and what was actually planned already right in the beginning, the dream that the client had. I'm very aware of my time, and when I get lost in this project, I can talk for hours, and I'm a little bit worrying that maybe I should stick to my notes, which are rather difficult to see with no light. Okay, so the factory I've talked about. Effectively, the building, there were 2 different types of buildings, and the whole structure of the building was designed to keep cool. So they were elevated. There was a conventional brick and mortar, which we'll see a slide just now, and then there was the prefab option. Now, originally, everyone said prefab, bad idea, bad idea. You could stand in the prefab option, and it was between 5 and 6 degrees cooler than when standing in the conventional business as usual brick and mortar. They got completely caught off guard, the demand on the prefab units. And the main reason for this is they were elevated off the ground. They had a simple little system which allowed for air to flow up along the skirting boards and little gaps in those. And then they had elevated windows that you just left slightly ajar, and it literally sucked the cool air that was in the shade underneath your own home and you actually didn't need aircon, which was mind-boggling. You don't realize how much 5 or 6 degrees is until you stand in it. The next slide is going to give you a bit of a fright, so brace yourselves. During practice, the volume was fairly loud, if it works. So we, not only was it slow, it was flipping hard. Not just working with the local communities at times that you would be doing work and you can't find someone, he's sleeping under a tree, to this was the ground conditions. And we'll flip into the next one on what did we do to solve it. Shame, Sharon. Sorry, is it keep on as it's on replay? Are we able to slip into the next slide? So while we're waiting for, there we go, technology to kick in. It's that key of knowing your environment. So know your client and remember it's the end user. Understands what the client's needs are. Remember to design with the end in mind, because it impacts, and utilize the knowledge of other professionals and individuals around you to develop a system that talks to each other, that's sustainable, that repeats what is already there. And you saw the ground conditions. What you may or may not have noticed is that coral is incredibly porous. It holds absolutely nothing. You put water and it's gone, especially when the topsoil has been stripped and there is no topsoil to work with. So in the top left-hand corner, every single home has its own set of plants that they choose that mimic and work well in the environment. And the hole gets dug. And then when the people are moving in, there's boxes and there's, as you can imagine, a whole lot of things, paper-based products or cardboard-based products that normally would go to a dump site. We recycle a lot of it, but anything related to that house goes into that hole where you see the tree. On top of that, there's a layer of coral, just a thin layer of coral, just as a separator. And then the soil that's been made goes on top of that. And it is beautiful. The trees and the development, and go and have a look on even on Google, you can see how the site is completely transformed. But that is also our stormwater catchment. So where normally we'd have a big ugly concrete thing with a curb on the side, now the water runs down the paving and disappears into those stormwater filtration devices. So effectively it's feeding the tree, it's taking whatever pollutants or anything, it's going through the systems, it's being filtered out and going back in directly where the rain falls, it goes straight back into that freshwater lens once it's gone through its natural filtration. It's amazing to see how the system works, and yet it's so simple. I'll talk very quickly about some lessons learned in South Africa where we don't have that kind of porosity. Below, I'm going to need to move on. Well, let's jump onto the road. So that's the stormwater. On the road side, of course, we don't have building material. There's no sand. So what we started to do is crush down coral. How did we do it? Well, we got different plants and we tried different things. We joined up with a contractor from South Africa who brought a lot of experience, and his whole role in the beginning was a company called DevTech, which helped train guys, Zanzibarians, in how to build in the civil environment. It's not something that they were used to doing, and so they learned a lot. In the process of, in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see what we started calling wormholes. And so you do all this prep work, and then you get this wormhole. And as you can imagine, in a road building environment, that's not great. What we've learned is those are not bad things when you're in an environment sitting on coral. You design through it. You then start to bring in different types of coral, smaller, broken down. You build it up. In some cases, we have had to plug some of those. And in some cases, we've used different geotechnical material to seal it off. But generally, it's okay that it's there. And we've utilized, we looked at permeable paving originally, manufacturing on sites. Those will come, those kind of items will come later. We've looked at different products in the permeable paving space to make that actually can be used in labor-based technologies, and those will come. But at this stage, we've gone with conventional cement blocks that are manufactured on site and laid. But if we have these wormholes, we deal with it, and we've put in systems and ways of dealing it from an operations and maintenance point of view. On the left is just a fun story of a young lady who was looking to buy a property, and she said, where am I going to grow and where am I going to keep my chickens? And so her name was Halami, and that's now called the Halami Gardens. So those people that buy into the apartments have each got, and they can buy their own little plots of land that they can develop and learn the permacultural processes of how to regenerate soil, of how to do all the stuff that I was exposed to that never thought I would. I'm jumping very quickly through. And as we go into the next slide, you'll start to see that we also came across some risks. And we found a massive cave. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, that is the exit of the cave. And then the top right-hand corner is the entry to the cave, and which would be slightly north of the X. Now we start to worry, we're putting houses on these things. If there's these kind of caves, what are we going to do? We started to realize that earlier on, these are areas where water's stored. These are areas where and just design around it, create it as a feature within the development. And so these are the kind of things that have been done with a client. So this cave looks completely different to what you can see now. On the top right-hand corner, that little exit is right next to one of the main roads. And what they've done is use big coral blocks and placed it around it. That's to keep people out and stop cars from driving into it. And we had to check them and then planted it. And so it's a massive big pot plant, basically. The trees are absolutely thriving. And once again, opportunity, risks can become opportunity if you remember and you design with the end in mind, that you want to create an environment, you want to create a development that looks after, cares for, and allows people to thrive. In another risk, anything in Zanzibar it looks like that picture of those valves. There used to be 2 pumps, there's now only 1, and that serves the entire southern portion of this node of the island, and it extracts from one of those water caves that we showed earlier. Risk, absolutely. Opportunity, they needed help. So let's jump in and start to help and find solutions. And we spend time with local authorities finding solutions, but in doing that, the buy-in from the local authorities and the president of Zanzibar, of Tanzania as well, has invested in this project 10 times over. The little time that was spent in helping them resolve these issues on site, where we were there anyway, has allowed massive investment and massive commitment from government. And it's something that we're finding is difficult in South Africa, but not impossible to step over, not impossible to work through. It's about education and it's about training. So look for risks and find opportunities. Don't just be an engineer and look for risks, but take it into opportunities. And as we're going, and I'm hoping to land shortly, is think out of the box. Think outside of the norm. Who really wants to be normal? We didn't go and study to be normal. We didn't start as civil engineers to be normal. And I'm not sure if your screen has flicked over. Mine hasn't yet, but I'll carry on and you'll see some crazy things that I've seen on the island, which Sometimes thinking outside of the normal may not be the cleverest option. Top left-hand corner, guys using machinery to get to the roof rather than having to climb. Bottom left-hand corner, those vehicles that you see around Zanzibar are unbelievable where they can go and what they can do. The reason for throwing that in there is spend time with the people that are around you, the neighbors, the community you're designing for. You'll be amazed what you learn and what they've been doing. That scaffolding in the middle at the bottom, I wouldn't use it. And I know any of health and safety on this that might be on this call won't cope, but it worked. I wouldn't use it, but think outside. Don't always be limited by what you do and what you've been told, or what you did and what you've been told. So on the bottom right, we advertised with a contractor. That doesn't used to happen. We worked side by side with developing people. There's certain sometimes you can't get product and from the environment that you're working in. So we had to import a lot of pipes and a lot of water systems, but we put it all in containers and we utilize local resources wherever we can. Some of the lessons learned, to reflect on to the next slide, and Jeff next week I'm sure we'll talk to it, is some of the lessons that we've learned in South Africa as well as over there, is education is key. And Sharon, you can go straight into the next. This is Hawaiian Forest Estate, been used as a sample or an example of sustainable stormwater, and Jeff will be talking, I'm sure, on SUDS, sustainable drainage systems. So I'm not going to spend time going on this, but rather use it. What we've learned in Fumba, what we learned in Zanzibar, key is teaching, is training, is bringing people on board as soon as you can. In the top left-hand corner, that little insert is how we left the swales. In the middle is a little picture of what some of the swales look like. The bottom right is the problem, is that a development that was built on stormwater systems based on swales, infiltration, attenuation, detention facilities in some such situations, has been brought in by residents that didn't understand the passion and the need in the beginning. And so what they've done is they've stripped out some of the swales. They've taken out of some of the natural vegetation that needed to be there because they didn't think it looked pretty. And they've replaced it, unfortunately, with what they thought was great landscaping and made their house look really pretty. Unfortunately, it impacted the people around you. And unfortunately, sometimes as people, as engineers, we forget that the actions that we play out or we design often impact people in a negative way. And it doesn't take a lot to stop, to think differently, to find out a little bit more information about your environment, about your client, and client is, remind you, is not always the person who pays. And the last slide that I want to talk to is that my background that I have on any MS Teams. And the reason why it's there is, one, it's beautiful. It reminds me of times with friends and family. But what it also shows is that as civil engineers, unfortunately, whatever development we build, we're going to leave a scar. And like this picture, beautiful environment, beautiful sunset, there's a track there that does leave a scar. But let's build in such a way that the scars are minimal, that we give recognition to the environment that we live in, and start to actually design cleverly. And so my only dream, my request coming out of today is, remember that start with the end in mind when you're doing any design. Spend time learning your environment, find out what works in that environment. It'll be different on every development. And then let's stop leaving scars, and rather let's leave things that can heal and create better environments. So I haven't even touched on some of the work that we'd be here for too many hours, but I hope I've ignited some kind of passion in some of the young designers coming through. And then I hand back over to Jesh just to close off and finish. Thank you, Jesh.
Thanks, Pete. So we've try to give you an overview of what we've done at the Fumba development. We're currently we're heading for construction of the second phase of the Fumba development. So hopefully at some point soon, we can either invite some of you to Zanzibar for a site visit, or we can give you an update on projects. But again, feel free to reach out to us if you want specifics on the project. Yeah, hope that this was really interesting and exciting for you. So we'll hand back over to Justin and for the Q&As.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, that was really inspirational. So I'm really happy to hear what you guys are doing there. I'm just going to monitor the Q&A chat. So to our participants, if you have any questions, just type them in the Q&A chat, and I'll pass them on to to Jesh and Peter. While we wait for that, though, guys, I mean, it's quite interesting how this talk panned out, because we had to shuffle you guys around, and I think it's so poignant, your talk today, especially in the context of COP26. In terms of the next generation of engineers coming through, or either young engineers in industry that are attending this talk, as a project team, you guys bring together a lot of different people from different backgrounds. But what would you look for in a young engineer coming through the system now?
Okay, I'll go first. Pete. So firstly, I must apologize for the poor lighting from Peter and I. We're now in the thick of load shedding. So I think that when we think about, let's call it a recruitment process, coming out of from a tertiary background, I think that there's not very many things that differentiates graduates from each other on the basis of the theoretical knowledge that they've acquired. And so the real thing that we look for, and I particularly look for this these traits in projects that I resource for, is the ability, one, to see the bigger picture, and two, to be able to connect all the dots. And I think that sometimes, with students that I mentor, someone is in second year and they have this intention to be a structural specialist. I think that sometimes that's a great passion to have, but it also limits you in terms of the opportunities that exist, not just in the built environment, but also just across all types of infrastructure and all the facets that engineering offers. So I would say bigger picture, and then to be able to connect the dots. And that's really something that stands out for me when, especially with our EITs, from a recruitment process.
Yeah,
Okay,
Justin, I love passion. And so when I see someone come through with passion, and I don't really care what the passion is, passionate people and that want to make a difference and want to change are fun to work with. And so I'm probably not the conventional engineer. In fact, I know I'm not. I have a little motto with my kids, is whenever they go somewhere, I say, what's the main rule? And when they're little, I've got a little bit grumpier as I got older, and you'll see my brother later next week, and you'll realize why I've got grumpy. But yeah, my thing is, first rule, have fun. And if you're not having fun in what you're doing, then it doesn't actually work. You get grumpy, you don't finish things on time. When you're having fun, your passion flows. And so a young engineer that comes out with passion, I don't really mind what it is. Hopefully we can help them fit into the box that they want to be in. And then once they start in their box, they realize that working inside boxes is actually not that fun. It's actually more fun to work outside the box and learn from others, be willing to glean off any opportunity they get. And yeah, and it starts with passion. Being clever.
Yeah, yeah, well, I think what you're talking to here is the point is, and this is what I found so really, really interesting about your talk, and I'll get to Wandile's question in a minute. But You know, what the COP26 has shown us is that the whole world needs to almost remake itself, right? Engineering needs to change, policies need to change, and kind of the, you know, Greta Thunberg and all these people have shown us that the guys at the top are really incapable of creating this change. Whereas what you guys have done from an engineering perspective is you've taken something and you've worked on a project in Zanzibar, for example, where the entire project is based on remaking that island, right? And I mean, I think it's just a fantastic inspiration to show the young engineers who are in industry now and also coming through the system that, you know, if you can take what you apply, have the learn in engineering and even outside of engineering and work with the passion, I think that you mentioned about, you can really come up with these incredibly unique solutions. And so, yeah, just moving on to Wandile's question on the cave. Could you just talk a bit more about the how you guys filled that in? I think Wandile is asking if it, you know, leaving it there may cause some type of issues, but I think if I recall, you mentioned you filled it in, or to some extent.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me answer that, Justin. I can see that, and let me answer it with answering the second out of curiosity. What design codes does Zanzibar use? And yeah, when you've been working in the engineering field for a while and you go to a place, and the first thing you have to ask is, what are the design codes? And when everyone looks at you blankly, you then say, well, what are some of the environmental codes? And they look at you blankly as well. And then you go and try and do the same in Tanzania and try and glean information out of people. So what did we use? We actually used our brains and our experience. And as much as possible, we use SA codes. They do work extensively on the British codes as well, which is historically a SADC region way of working. So we were very much aware of utilizing whatever codes best developed the environment. So in other words, from the baseline was for water was taking international standards and what's been done. Then bringing it down, comparing it to what we're doing in South Africa, comparing it to what we're doing elsewhere, and then trying to improve on it and give people better than what to take the recycle to whatever we're doing to actually improve on. And that was because we started with the end in mind. So what does that do? And as an engineer, to not have those nice, beautiful boundaries that we normally work in? Well, it was simple. With this cave particular one, first of all, I had lots of sleepless nights. What if there were others? We've only found one other so far, and it was much smaller than this particular one. But what did we do? We, instead of looking at design codes, we asked the local communities, are there any others? And the guy said, well, we think there's one other. And we went and found it. Local knowledge is incredibly helpful. So how did we deal with the cave? Well, we just moved the buildings. We didn't build over it. We made space, and we've created a, yes, on the small end, we've created a pot plant, but on the other end, we've kept it open. We're creating it, and we want to use it as well. The client wants to use us. Say we stopped talking about Bosch and all the other client representatives that were there, and we started talking about we, and it's still stuck. And we really did find other solutions for it. And we started to find stories in the local tribe of what those caves used to be used, and funny stories, and some not so funny stories, some scary stories. But the idea is to utilize those caves as storytelling places. Well, that particular cave. So the building that was going to go there is no longer there. It's moved. And that's really what we saw. We saw a risk, we saw an opportunity, but we also dealt with it by avoiding the risk. We have got a road that goes over, but we moved the road to the area where we've got about 1.2 meters of cover before we get to the top of the cave. We've been running construction emission plants and that over it, and we've been monitoring and inspecting it, and we're very comfortable that we don't need to worry about it. But we will continue to monitor. Sorry, Jesh. Yes.
No, please, thanks. If I may just also offer an answer to Wandile's question, particularly around the codes. I think that one of the things that we've grown accustomed to, particularly from studying in South Africa and then practicing in South Africa is that we've got a very organized built environment. And although we complain a lot, where our engineering profession is on par, we actually have the 7th biggest professional grouping of engineers in the world. So we do punch our weight. I think that when we do international projects, we do quite a lot of work in East Africa, and although they have local standards, our client, being a German client, preferred for us to lean a lot on South African standards and design codes. But as Peter mentioned, we have the flexibility in this project, or the client's flexibility in this project lent itself to whenever we found something that we had not encountered before, that we would tailor make a solution that suited the local environment. And that's something that in a South African context, we often think first our PI, what's going to happen here. And so I think that also just understanding how you manage risk is also dependent on your relationship with the client. And then you talked a little bit about the consequences of the additional time due to the constant change in design. And I think that that's something that you'll encounter irrespective of whether you have the kind of changes where you find a cave, or whether you have some unstable ground conditions that you then need to start stabilizing, and then that has time and cost implications. And I think that how you manage it is really a factor of the relationship you have with your client. That's the first. And also how much flexibility there is in the budget and how creative your team can be. So there's times where you have to manage a very limited budget, but the solution will be something that's different. And just before I close off on that one, I think one of the things that we also need to bear in mind is that we often think that doing this type of project is very, very expensive, and that there's a premium that one has to pay to be able to develop a project like this. And what we found on this project, and then all the subsequent projects that we've done, is that because we work in an environment where we sort of in our minds decouple capital expenditure and operation and maintenance, we think of delivering the cheapest solution to the client and then walking away from the project. But when you bring operation and maintenance together with the CapEx and you think about the life cycle costing of a project, then you're able to see that you might pay 10% more. And again, I'm not saying that this project would be more expensive, because in fact it wasn't. But you might pay a little premium on the capital expenditure, but you really see the benefits in the life of the asset. So I think that that's just something to bear in mind on the time and cost element.
And Jesh, can I add to that? And we've seen it. I was eThekwini for 12 years as well in my foundation days. And you see it even within our local authorities. And this is not a criticism, because there's amazing work that's been done within eThekwini, and we all know a lot of the stuff that they've been doing. And what you've seen, the structure that's in place is there's water, and maybe they've got a bit of a link with sanitation, but they've got no link with the roads, and they've got no link with the electricity. And in fact, they just often don't talk other than the conventional way of talking. And we need, as engineers, we need to start to change that when we go and we're developing and we're working in a municipal environment. And it's something that I missed to say is one of the key elements is exactly what Jesh has mentioned, to have a, let's call it a special purpose vehicle by which, or a utilities company that's linked to, if you're doing a development, it's linked so you can connect all those facilities and all those utilities. And so, but as I say, that's not a criticism from a local municipality point of view, because as I say, eThekwini have been massive steps in a lot of the work that they've been doing to start to integrate more and more and more.
And I think, actually, I'm glad you guys touched on that, because I was going to ask, I kind of have a double-barreled type question, but it almost requires an entire paradigm shift in the way things are done, right? I mean, Peter, you've spoken a lot about what we call in research the edge effect. So essentially, it's a term, I think, in biology, at the edge of the ecosystems are the most creative, or the most diverse organisms, because you've got all of these different things coming together. And it's much like that with engineering now. And it's the way we're trying to drive research and teaching, is that you can't, and I think you mentioned that you can't think of it as a structural engineer and as a mechanical engineer. You have to think of it as one system, because in order to address these global grand challenges, you have to develop new ways of thinking. And so I guess, you know, how would you guys, or what do you do with the current situation in South Africa? I mean, how would you guys as engineers fix it? It seems like, and the reason why I'm saying South Africa is just in terms of our context. It's also not a criticism, but you mentioned how the municipality, a bit about how the municipality works, which is a very old, archaic kind of entrenched system. And really you need a very dynamic team if you look at you guys. So how do you answer that? How do you guys take South Africa forward?
Well, this sounds like the question that's asked, you know, like on a stage where you like have 5 seconds to change the world. But we're going to try and answer your question. So I think the first thing that we need to remember is also that we're coming out of a time where infrastructure investment has been done differently and is being done very differently. So if we think about some of the challenges that we're seeing with regard to infrastructure development, there's a shortage on funding, and where the need is versus where the money is sits in almost opposing sides of the same need. And you'll see we're seeing now a move to more collaborative type projects, PPPs, concessions, and those types of things. And that's forcing us as an industry to start thinking differently about how we offer our services. Now, Peter and I, we are in the space of consulting engineering, and traditional consulting engineering, the client has a problem and you as the engineer responds to it. But we're playing in the space right now where we're saying, we have a solution to a problem we know exists, and that's how the industry will change. Because oftentimes, as engineers, sometimes we feel we have these skills that we want to be able to offer and that the problem will come to us. But the way in which we're seeing the problem is now different. And as Peter talked about, bringing those two things together, the two connections that make the most sense is water and energy, for instance. And we've done some work not related to this project, but what we've started looking at is pathways for energy security, but using water, for instance. So when we think about doing a water supply project, we don't think about the energy potential that a water supply project has. So we go in with our hydraulic engineers or civil engineers primarily to be able to look at the benefits of a water supply system, but we don't think about the inherent benefits of being able to generate electricity from hydro, from biogas, from wastewater, for instance. So I think being able to connect those dots is something that's important. And then the other thing for us to really think about is the kind of problems that we have. A lot of it comes from the silo mentality, and where we sit right now is because we're seeing an integration toward all the concepts around net zero and commitments that are coming out of municipalities around things like green buildings, sustainable precincts. And it's forcing us to be able to rethink how textbook tells us to do design and to implement infrastructure versus what people actually want, which is a more efficient and a solution that actually responds to a problem they have.
Yeah, Justin, my answer is slightly different. I don't know. But what I do know is there's certain things that I can do differently. And if I do those things differently, maybe someone else will do it with me. And so to everyone on the group, I mean, I think we've got over, I can't remember, I think we were almost 200 people at one stage. I think we had over 200. And if each of us can do something different and each of us can take a different approach to the way we design, that's really made a massive difference already. And so Jesh is the clever one in the team. She pulls all the dots together and she's able to communicate with everybody at a level that they're able to communicate. I'm just able to say, hey, come, let's go and try this one. And let's try this. And what about that? Why won't it work? You're going to hear a lot of people say, oh, you won't be able to do that. Oof, no, you can't do that. And just ask them why. Say very politely, oh, why, what have you done that made it not work? And you'll find a lot of the places, they actually haven't done it. They haven't tried it. And so, yeah, I can do differently. That's all I can say.
Yeah, thanks. That's fantastic. So I have another two questions. See, we're getting close to 7 o'clock, but The important ones are from a research point of view. In this project, is there any budget allocated to putting instruments out to say, you've mentioned something, right, that my colleagues in Cambridge have been struggling to figure out, and that is natural ventilation in a subtropical environment. And they can do it pretty well in the UK, where at night it gets very cold, so they can ventilate their buildings beautifully. But I was just trying to have a look at the pictures in the background of your buildings, and they've used some unique slanting roofs, right, and positioned in certain ways. I assume that is involved in part of that natural ventilation. So it would be interesting to know if if you guys are measuring or if there's budget to measuring these types of things, and then or for us to come along and actually take some measurements. But then the second question I have is, as a lecturer, for myself personally, what do I teach these guys coming through the system so that they can integrate into your teams and work on these incredibly complicated in the sense that it's so different from what you would see if you went into the municipality, for example?
So to answer, I'll let Jesh answer the second question this time. That's the tough one. I hope you're listening, Jesh. But I answer on the building and cooling. Where's it cooler, under an umbrella or under a tree? And there's so many answers already there. Our environment answers a lot of these questions already. And would someone in America be able to find solutions in South Africa or in Africa? Probably not, unless they actually go and look at the environment. And so we've learned so much from the local people. And sometimes, and it's difficult. How do you do that as a consulting engineer when you're working on a conventional project where you say to someone, you need to go and sit down with the local community and find out what they used to do? And how did that work? And that's what our client did. He spent time growing up as a boy sitting under trees when it was hot. And so he started asking his architects, well, if it's cooler under a tree, how do we make our development in such a way that we don't need to aircon everything? Now, he's battled in that in the conventional construction. And so where the prefab options and developments and work that he'd been done started to lag behind, he had to push harder and use conventional structures in some situations. His dream was to have multi-story buildings that made out of timber. Well, there were some challenges to that, so he had to adapt. And he's still doing research, and they've got another project at the moment which they're looking to have a zero footprint, carbon footprint, to reduce the heat temperatures, the temperatures in the development. And he's doing some fantastic stuff. But it started with asking his architect, when he was a boy, when they got hot, living in Tanzania, they went and sit under a tree. If they sat under the building, under the cover of the building, it was in the shade, but it wasn't as cool as under a tree. What was different? And so that was what he challenged his architect to do. And this has been done around. It's not new. It's been done. It's just pulling those things and asking the right questions at the right time. Jeff, do you want to answer what challenges do we put to our students?
Yeah, I think just to close out on on Justin's question around research, I think one of the things that as consulting engineers, we don't do is we're not heavily focused on the research elements unless it's a requirement. And in this instance, I think that there are several funds that are available to be able to do this. And if our client is an enabling one, who if we put in a proposal to say, listen, we want to be able to measure something, he would be open to it. And I think that there's lots of pockets of funding to be able to look at these type of sustainable solutions. So if you do have an idea, it's certainly something that we can take forward to our client. But on the other thing around how do you train, like you have all of these beautiful young minds waiting to come into industry, and how do you influence them in a different way? And I think that it comes down to the fact that where we got to, I think that ultimately, so for people like Peter and I, we would have got to where we are, but maybe very far down the line. I think maybe we don't give enough credit to the people who pushed us into this direction. And I'll say this, that I would say that the journey started probably more than 10 years ago. And that was through a really innovative architect who wears red pants, and a very creative urban designer who's actually now retired, Erky Wood. And I think that between Eric Noah and Erky, they pushed us into a direction that made us very uncomfortable at first. It was a very uncomfortable. And what Eric said to us some years ago was, I'm going to un-engineer you engineers. And when we were initially told that as engineers, we operate too much in this box, it was very offensive, because we felt like I've got a background in water, Peter's got a background in roads and stormwater, and we felt insulted by the fact that there's this architect that's telling us that the way that we're doing stuff is wrong. And it took us a really long time to be able to appreciate this. And it did take a lot of research and a lot of work on our own part to be able to get to the point where we are right now, and to be able to give that value to our clients. But ultimately, for where you are, is you're teaching engineered systems, but the creativity actually comes from what you see around you. And that's where, because you've got this diverse group of people who are seeing the world in such a different way, and coupled with technology, it's actually not what you can teach them, but rather what you give them the opportunity to teach you. And that's really the key. I don't think, I mean, your curriculum is established, and it's EXA accredited. So the idea behind what you're going to teach them is to be able to give them space in that curriculum to go and find the other exciting things that are being done elsewhere in the world. And then how can we bring that into the South African context and then make it work? And I think that's the beauty of what you are able to do.
Cool, thanks. I'll solve that. Okay, so we've got a hand from Dario, so I'm going to ask him to unmute himself and ask his question. Thanks, Dario, go for it. I'm not sure if you are talking, Dario, but it's muted. I think you can unmute yourself. Okay, well, we'll just let Dario figure that out. But yeah, okay, so I think, you know, yeah, I just want to thank you guys for your talk tonight. It was really cool and inspirational, and I hope, you know, some of the undergraduate students appreciated the complexity that you put in towards them, and the invitation for them to be creative in using what they've learned in their undergraduate careers. And yeah, I would just really encourage our guys coming through the system and the young engineers out there to follow your lead. And yeah, thanks for sharing everything with us. Sharon, I'll pass back over to you now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pringle. Oh my word, Jesh and Peter, you guys were so inspirational. This was an incredible talk. And I just have to say, what an exciting time to be an engineer. And if any of you in your final year are struggling with your design and wondering where this is going to get you and where you're going and all of that, I hope Jesh and Peter reinstilled that there's such a wonderful opportunity out there for you to create a difference in this world. And Peter, you spoke a lot about what was my theme this year for our Durban branch, which was to find opportunity in difficult times. And you really, really brought that out today. And I am indeed grateful, absolutely grateful to have had both of you as guests here this afternoon. So with that, attendees, we have come to the end of our 8th event. I'm going to ask Kavita to please put on the chat box the link to our recordings of presentations 5, 6, and 7. We managed to get that through our SAICE National Office Systems this week, and you guys can watch those episodes if you missed them live. I can see that they're being put onto the chat box right now. And then, yeah, I want to express my appreciation to SANLAM for sponsoring us and keeping us all motivated, especially at this time of the year where, you know, there's a lot going on. So thank you, SANLAM. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to have this successful and invaluable event. I encourage everybody to just scroll up on the chat box and enter their competition. And yeah, before we head into the evening, guys, I'm just going to ask you to please partake in one more activity for the evening. The SAICE Durban team is starting to plan for next year. And I'm just going to ask Matthew to put up a poll for us. I'm going to give it a few seconds, Matt. Okay, yeah, so the poll's up on my side. I hope you guys can see it. And we want to know, as a SAICE member from Durban, and we're specifically looking for input from the guys in Durban, will you be interested in attending in-person events such as the branch meetings from February 2022? And the options are yes or no, you would prefer to continue virtual events. Or whether you want herd immunity to be reached first before we go into in-person events. If I can give you a few minutes to just respond, and then we can proceed into concluding the evening. Okay, thank you for that, everyone. I will present the results for that next week, and we'll run the poll again so that we can get a response from everybody who attends. Some people are not attending every week. But yeah, thank you to everybody that attended tonight. And we are looking forward to next week. We have Peter's better half, should I say? No, not better half, that's wrong. Older brother, should I say, who will be joining us. Sorry, Peter, I please forgive me. And yeah, he'll be taking us through a technical talk, so I'm looking forward to that. And with that, members, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and have a wonderful week ahead. I will see you back here next week for week number 9. Good evening.